Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in today. I got a little decor back there, put some lights in this little like metal tree, geometric looking tree that I usually have up. I took some of these like little, what do they call them, fairy lights? No, dewdrop lights, that's what they were called. I got them from Target, battery operated, and just kind of ran them around the tree, and then I put a little deer beside it as well. So keeping it festive up here. But I'm glad to have you with me today. This is going to be a pretty straightforward video. Recently on Twitter I asked, like, are there any certain types of makeup products that you'd like to know a top 5 for? And I did see several responses for concealer, and I wanted to dive into that right now, but more specifically concealers that are very creamy, very hydrating for the skin. I think we're getting into that time of year. I can hear the wind outside the window right now. It can be kind of a drying time of year, and I feel like a dry looking under eye can be one of the biggest aspects of dissatisfaction with the whole makeup look, I think. If I've done something that ends up looking too thick, too dry in that area, it's just hard for me to ignore it, you know, even more so than maybe an eyeshadow palette that didn't perform perfectly or a lip color that might not be just right. For some reason, I will hone in on the under eye area. So I wanted to give you a few recommendations for what I feel are some of the most creamy, hydrating under eye concealers you could use, but that also pack in a good amount of coverage as well. I've got a couple drugstore options and some high-end also. It's going to be a mix. So the first one that I want to mention here is actually from Becca. And this is one where I know I tried it years ago. I remember, I think, being in the other house and having this concealer and thinking, why did they put shimmer in it? Like, you could definitely see a noticeable shimmer. Now, I had repurchased it more recently to give it another shot because I just heard someone raving on it, and I thought, am I missing something with this? I have it in light to medium, and I believe there's also a deeper option. But there is no shimmer in this at all. It's a creamy, very brightening concealer, and every time I use it, I am pretty impressed by the level of moisture happening in there. It kind of does take me back to a little bit of a Benefit Erase paste kind of vibe, but I would say even more brightening. So it can be the kind of thing that I might layer up with another kind of concealer, and I've noticed some different concealers that I used to think were more drying actually perform a little better on top of this because this adds so much moisture. Any kind of formula you might have on hand, it all looks a little bit better when this is used. But this does have a lot of coverage in itself. That's really cool. And again, next level brightening. I'm just so glad that it seems like more of a straight up creamy color instead of having any kind of shimmer bits infused. But I think most people see this and they reference the brightening quality, but another purpose that this is really effectively serving is for sure the hydration. Another one that I want to mention that is extremely moisture packed is this Kevyn Aucoin Sensual Skin Enhancer. This is a pricey product, but you feel like you're getting some sort of endless supply in this pot because a little bit does go a long way. I wear it in SX05, and as you can see there, see the peaks in that product? Like if I were to dip my finger in, the product would just be thick and rich and just kind of stand up as I pull away from it. It's incredibly creamy, incredibly full coverage. As far as both of these products go application-wise, you could dab them in with your finger. You could use a beauty blender to kind of help melt them down into the skin, or you could use a thick, dense brush. I really like that method too. I think that maintains a lot of coverage. The one that I was using there with the Becca was this one from Real Techniques. It actually comes from a highlighter duo, but it's just a great size and a great density level, and I really like that with any of the concealers I'm going to mention. Another one that I think is great is this one that's also from Real Techniques, and it's their Blend and Blur contour brush, but this really does a nice job of moving the product across the skin. But again, fingers are a nice option, also a sponge, but just keep in mind either of those options I think draw back a little bit of the coverage from these products, but they could also be a nice little ending step if you wanted to blot over something you've already blended out, give it an even fresher look, go for it. I mean, some of this might take a little bit of trial and error and using some different methods just to see what works best. Also, think about the amounts of these different products that you are putting on. You might hear me say a little goes a long way with most of these because that really is true, and I think some people overuse the product and then they're like, oh, I feel like a goopy, tacky mess on my under eye. Well, it doesn't take much, okay? Start small with this stuff and then work up if you absolutely need to, but this one one, again, we're talking coverage, we're talking a lot of moisture. If you have an extremely dry under eye, I could see this being very friendly to that zone. But instead of that peachy pink brightener color I just mentioned, this is going to come in a range of skin tones. This product really has been around a long time, has a cult following. It's a very special product and probably the creamiest, most hydrating concealer. Now I want to mention another one that is in a different format, but also is super creamy, and it's the Tarte Creaseless Concealer, the Maracuja Creaseless Concealer as it's been called. It used to exist in a squeezy tube, and now they've put it in a doe foot applicator style product here. And this one is really amazing. It's very, very rich. And again, with the little bit goes a long way. We're talking like a couple of small dots, you know, and I actually added that to my look today. I'm feeling so hydrated on the under eye area, but this packs in a lot of coverage, a lot of moisturization. I have it in the shade 20N Light. It's a rich concealer. It almost looks a little dewy on the skin before you set it. That's another thing here. Do these need to then be set? You're trying to add some moisture, but then do you come away feeling like, oh, I don't want to feel tacky? I do like a little bit of light setting powder, lightly applied on top of these different things. And to me, that just helps the staying power a little bit. It doesn't make me look like super dry. It doesn't undo the goodness that the hydrating concealer did. There's a good one from Catrice, the HD Baking and Setting Powder. You could take a little bit of Rimmel Stay Matte. That's a nice one because the brush only lets you pick up a small amount at a time. Laura Mercier Loose Powder, the pressed or the loose version actually. Hourglass Veil is another nice one. These are powders that go on looking really, really undetectable. But you've got to do your part in making sure, okay, I'm not picking up too much. I'm not going over and over the area again and again. You want to keep it light and you will still take advantage of the nice moisture that these products are providing. But again, the Tarte is another nice option for a very rich concealer. If you were to feel it, you'd feel like there's a little bit of tacky stickiness between the fingers when you use this. It really is a nice product. There's a lot of moisture there. Now, if we're talking drugstore, I definitely would mention the e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer. This one is very popular for good reason. They came out with the original camo concealer that reminded many of us of Tarte Shape Tape, and now we've got a version that has definitely a lot more noticeable creaminess and richness and hydration. I would say it doesn't come off with quite that tackiness that I feel in the Tarte Maracuja concealer, but it is nicely rich, and it's another thing where you're not going to go painting like a big full-on opaque triangle of this stuff on your under eye. We're talking dot, 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 maybe wherever you need it, and then blend it out. Use the brushes I mentioned, use a beauty blender if you'd like it to thin it out a little bit more, but this is an exceptional product. If you felt like, generally speaking, every concealer you try has been too much on the dry side and you would just like to dip your toe into something that might have a little more moisture and you don't want to drop money on the first three that I mentioned, this would be a great place to go. The e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer, which I wear in the shade Light Peach. I am, however, not Light Peach in the original Camo Concealer. There's a difference in their shade ranges. They don't exactly match up, so keep that in mind if you haven't tried this. You really need to reassess the shades. Last thing I want to mention here is another drugstore concealer that I would say doesn't have quite the coverage the e.l.f. has. I think the e.l.f. is very impressive coverage-wise and can really hang with the Tarte and even with the Kevyn Aucoin that I mentioned. But this one's a little bit on the lighter side. I think it still offers moisture, but some I've heard with aging skin say everything just feels too thick. If you actually have a crepiness issue on the under eye, you're wanting to go a little bit more the thin route. Now, L'Oreal recently put out something that I reviewed in a bite-sized review video, and it's called like eye cream in a concealer. Very, very thin. The coverage is not amazing. And I found myself using that thinking L'Oreal already has a pretty good product called the Age Perfect Radiant Concealer. And this is not as much coverage as the first four that I mentioned, but maybe that's not exactly what you need. Maybe you need some evening out, but you also really would prioritize a lightness in feel. This still has moisture in it. It's richer than the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow concealers, and it offers way more coverage than that new eye cream in a concealer that they're putting out. But you put it on and you don't feel like, okay, zhunk, it's just dried down and now I can see texture more. It doesn't have that unflattering dry down. But like I said, thinner application compared to everything I've mentioned there. Those are a little bit more heavy duty creamy. This offers the moisture in a little bit lighter, more subtle way. Definitely lighter coverage, but could be exactly the thing that somebody needs if you're thinking, well, I've tried some of those others and they feel a little too weighty on the skin, a little too much moisture. This is the moisture in a bit more subtle way, but still has some nice coverage, and that, for reference, I wear in the shade 200 Ivory. So there you go, guys. Those are my 5 concealer recommendations, creamy concealers that do offer some hydration to the skin. Each one a little different from the next, as you could see, but I think there are options out there in both the drugstore and the high-end marketplace. It's really refreshing to see that there's something out there like e.l.f. Hydrating Camo Concealer, because before, I remember it being very hard to come by a drugstore concealer that would give you any amount of moisture. I'm just talking within the last couple of years. It's not been easy to come by, and now we do have some things like the L'Oreal, like the e.l.f. that are very much paying attention to giving us a little more moisture to that area. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments section. If you've tried anything great that falls under this category, let us all know, or any just stories that you have to tell about the things that I have mentioned. We'd love to hear, and I will see you guys again very soon. Bye.